Hey there, welcome to episode 12 of the Open Floor podcast. I'm Ali Mosallai,
And I'm Aryan Narayan.
and we are finally here with the second episode of the season. We apologize for not keeping up with our promised upload schedule. School has kept us extremely busy, especially with the challenges of the unique learning style of this year. We will do our best going forward to stick to our schedule and upload an episode every other week.
Now, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about a more somber topic. We want to honor the memory of the late great American leader Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And to talk about her thoughts on Ginsburg's life and legacy, we have with us the student representative to the Lexington School Board, Sara May.
Now, without any further ado, on to the episode.
A few weeks ago, the venerated Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away at the age of 87 on September 18th.
Though it was known previously that Ginsburg was fighting cancer, her death was still sudden and shocking, adding to the chaos of an already tumultuous year. She leaves behind a great legacy.
At the moment, most news networks and people in the United States overall are focused more on the political struggle behind filling the vacancy that her death has created. However, we would instead like to talk about the legacy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what she meant to people across America.
We are very happy today to have Sara May, the student representative to the Lexington School Board, to talk with us about these topics today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, all right, let's start out with a more broad question. So, we wanted to know, what did Ruth Bader Ginsburg mean to you?
Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a pioneer in so many ways, but to me, she stands out in my brain as a voice of fierce reason and inspiration. She famously said, "Fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you." And I really carry that quote with me in some way or another every day, especially in civic engagement and leadership and on the school board. Towards the end of middle school and at the beginning of high school, I dreamed to be a lawyer, and one of my inspirations was Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
And so, throughout her life, Ginsburg fought for the rights of millions of Americans across the country and from all walks of life. What can we do to uphold her legacy and to continue her efforts in improving our country?
I feel that it is so important to uphold the legacies of our great leaders. We've lost so many amazing people this year. I won't go into names because this podcast is dedicated to Justice Ginsburg, but I think it's super important to realize each one of the hardships they've overcome and every accomplishment they've achieved in their lifetime. As for Judge Ginsburg, continuing to talk about the things that she fought so hard for and the life that she had to fight so hard to have are things that I think are important in remembering her. As for continuing her efforts in improving our country, Justice Ginsburg proved that there is a seat at the table for everyone who wants one. No matter your religion, race, gender, you have a right to belong. And when you're there, you don't have to do things the way that the person before you did, because you are the first of your ideas, you're the first of your kind. I'm the first Sarah, you're the first Ali, and the first Aryan. Your ideas matter, and you have a seat at the table. And I think a lot of women in particular will be inspired by her legacy and use that to continue in her footsteps. A political figure said this quote after the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I think it was perfectly said. So I'm not even going to try and paraphrase it, but she said, "Growing up as a woman in America, you're always on the lookout for anyone who's made it regardless of shared philosophy. That's how rare achieving such heights as she did is for a woman in our country, especially at the time that she achieved it."
Yeah, that's really well said. You mentioned a lot of what Ginsburg did politically and also socially, and she was certainly a social icon. She actually got the nickname Notorious RBG as an homage to the rapper Notorious B.I.G., and she had many books and movies created about her life, and that just really shows how much people respected her as an individual. So, what was one aspect of her personal life or of her as a person that you admired?
I admired her resilience both physically and mentally. Physically, she battled cancer 5 times over the past 21 years and rarely missed work while undergoing treatment because she understood the power and the privilege that she had. Mentally, she was the oldest member of the court but offered often the most riveting and impactful dissents, which are some of the aspects of RBG as an individual that I really admire.
And so, she was also known for being a force to be reckoned with on the floor of the court. She was someone that was really assertive with her opinions, and she was characterized as being steadfast in defending her opinions. And so additionally, she was a very uniquely skilled lawyer and was also intimately familiar with the workings of the law. And so, what do you admire about her professional and political career?
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was close friends with Justice Antonin Scalia during the time that they were both on the court. And if you know anything about the court, you know that Justice Scalia butted heads with Justice Ginsburg ideologically because Scalia was a staunch conservative and Ginsburg was a liberal judge. However, the fact that they could be such close friends shows their moral character, like how they can put work aside from daily life and how people mattered to them more than politics. It reminds me of the unlikely friendship between Vice President Joe Biden and Senator John McCain. The personal relationship and trust that they put on each other to find common ground stood out to me just like the relationship between Ginsburg and Scalia did.
Yeah. Also, it's really admirable how, as a woman in the 1950s, Ginsburg, she encountered many social and institutional barriers in her, at the time, ambitious goal of becoming a successful lawyer. For example, despite her exemplary academic record, she found it very, very difficult to find a job at a law firm. However, her story of immense success, it's become an inspiration for many people, not just in America, but across the world. How have she and her accomplishments empowered you in your own life?
I feel like she lived a life with great empathy for others. Maybe that came from her political career or career as a lawyer, but perhaps her job as a professor too. I don't know. But she understood everyone, but especially advocated for those who are being portrayed as less than or penalized for who they were. And I aspire to be someone like her. I think that many people lose empathy in politics because of the hostile environment and the constant attacks and tweetbacks that happen. But honestly, I think that I've gained empathy from being involved in politics. And I often don't even like to refer to politics as politics because every piece of politics affects someone's life and their livelihood and their rights. So I like to call it human rights or the rights of everyday people. But I like to talk on a human basis. And since being more involved in politics and movement building, the biggest joy of any day is hearing people's stories and being able to put myself in their shoes and understand their struggles and joyful moments. I really, really enjoy that. Justice Ginsburg always advocated for the marginalized, and I try to do the same because those people are the ones that are hurting the most and matter the most.
Now, Justice Ginsburg was one of the most senior members on the Supreme Court, um, having 27 years being on the court. And so during these 27 years, Ginsburg had a hand in thousands, many thousands of cases and rulings. But what were some of the overarching themes in Ginsburg's work, and what are the overall impacts that she had on our society?
To simplify her passion into categories, I would say that the overarching themes would be women's rights, equality based on gender, LGBTQ rights, and immigrant rights. And even simplifying her work, those categories encompass basically every person. And so she was able to reach corners of our country, all corners of our country, and on some level affect and touch every person's life.
So yeah, Ginsburg during her long career, she had such a large impact on everyone in this country because she sought equality for all. Um, but it wasn't just on her country that where she had an influence. She had a monumental influence on the Supreme Court as well as American politics in what's considered pretty much an isolated sphere to the people who we elect. She was a colossal figure that inspired many, and her death was understandably really shocking when people heard about it. So, how do you think her sudden passing impacted both you and society as a whole?
I had heard news before her passing about her cancer coming back and her hospitalization to undergo chemotherapy treatments. So I think I was prepared for some bad news just because of the number of times she's had to fight cancer and her increasing age. For our society, it's really sad that the death of a pioneer in so many aspects is met with a stringent political battle to replace her seat. She knew the political implications that would occur if she passed away or retired before November 3rd. which is part of the reason she continued to push on and do such great work even through all the chemo and cancer treatments. For the average citizen, I think many people felt lost for what would come next, including myself. The loss of such an amazing leader at such a crucial time in our politics and on our Supreme Court made me feel at one point that there was no going forward anymore. But yet, still we rise. We cannot give up hope because Justice Ginsburg would have wanted us to fight for her and in her legacy and vote for Joe Biden.
All right, now circling back a bit, Ginsburg had a long and illustrious career, not only as a lawyer, but also as a teacher and, of course, as a Supreme Court justice. And though her career was filled with many triumphs, in of which you had mentioned were fighting for gender equality and so much more, what specifically do you think were her most significant achievements?
Well, I think being nominated to the Supreme Court in and of itself was a huge deal for women at the time. And she said at the announcement, referencing her mother, I pray that I might be all that she would have been had she lived in an age where women could aspire and achieve, and daughters are cherished as much as sons. Some of the more remarkable cases that she won were the Stephen Weinfeld case, which was a law that said that widows, not widowers, were eligible for Social Security payments, and she said that that was unconstitutional. Another case was U.S. versus Virginia case, which was regarding a military academy that said that only men could be there and not women. In Obergefell versus Hodges case, which granted same-sex couples the right to marry in all 50 states. Olmsted versus LC, which guaranteed the rights of people with mental disabilities to live in their communities under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstelt case, which imposed strict restrictions and requirements on abortion providers, including mandates. And Justice Ginsburg was one of the people who shut down that bill, and so it didn't pass. Some of her famous dissents were the Sessions versus DeMea Act, which she struck down this legislation that allowed certain non-citizens to be expelled from the country because she said that it was unconstitutional. And Ledbetter versus Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, she wrote a dissent, and I encourage people to read more about it if they don't know the case because it's a really interesting case that I won't go into too much about.
In the beginning of your response, you talked about how impressive it was that Ginsburg, in a time where women were not adequately represented in law, where she was still able to get nominated to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. I think it's just as impressive that she began her career with nearly bipartisan support, and she was confirmed to her position with a vote of 97-3 in the Senate. So, do you think she was able to continue along with this path and help unite the country during her life, seeing how partisan our country is in a time like this?
I think that the vote of 97-3 shows how she earned the respect and admiration of colleagues on both sides of the aisle, which in this day and age you said is almost impossible to do. And although the agreements between the two sides of the aisle are rare, along with between the two sides of the court. I think that she was able to gain the respect of her colleagues on both sides of the aisle because of her passion for her job and how much she cared about it for others. And I think that many people saw it after her passing, the outpouring of support and love for her family and her legacy from people on both sides of the aisle. So I think that was something that united the country and showed that in her legacy that more people are striving to unite our country.
All right, now as we close off our discussion, we want to acknowledge the many memories that we remember from the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was able to touch the lives of so many people, both of the younger and older generations, and not even just in America, but all over the world. And so, what is one memory of her life that resonates with you the most?
We'll end on a light note. When I think of RBG, I always remember that video of her lifting weights and doing exercises with her personal trainer. And to see her fervor and work to stay healthy even at that age always motivates me to get my butt out of my desk chair and go outside and exercise.
And before we end, do you have any other remarks about RBG that you would like to mention to our listeners?
I just think she was such an inspirational figure, and she'll definitely be someone that future generations and even now read about in their history books. I think it's so important for people to honor her legacy because we can learn so much from her dedication and from her life.
Yeah, Ruth Bader Ginsburg will certainly be remembered for many, many years to come, considering how groundbreaking she was in her many years of on the Supreme Court and throughout her professional career. I think that's a great place to close off our discussion with Sara May, who is, as we previously mentioned, the student representative to the school board in Lexington.
With this episode, our goal was to highlight RBG's legacy and the impact that she had on individuals and America as a whole. And we think this discussion was really great in doing that. Thank you for taking some of your time to come by and talk with us.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Open Floor.
Please follow us on whatever platform you get your podcast from. A full list of where you can find us is available at openfloor.me/listen.
Additionally, please follow us on Instagram at Open Floor Podcast or on Twitter at The Open Floor for updates on whenever we upload a new episode and much more.
Consider supporting the podcast by visiting our website at openfloor.me.
I'd also like to thank our wonderful editor Amin Purgul Mohammed for editing this and all of our episodes.
I'm Ali Mosalleh,
And I'm Aryan Narayan.
and we'll see you in the next episode of Open Floor.